Sometimes the smallest act of kindness costs everything you have left and changes everything you thought you knew. Emma Carter stared at the glowing screen of her phone and felt her stomach sink. $27.14. That was all the money left in her checking account. She checked the number again, hoping she had missed a digit, hoping some forgotten deposit had appeared overnight. Nothing changed. $27.14. Outside her apartment window, gray clouds hung low over the small Ohio town, casting long shadows across the parking lot below. Inside, the scent of macaroni and cheese drifted from the tiny kitchen where her 8-year-old daughter, Lily, sat at the table coloring pictures with a box of crayons that had long since been worn down to stubs. "Mom, look," Lily said with a bright smile, holding up a drawing of a little house with flowers in front. Emma smiled back, determined not to let her worries show. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Lily grinned and returned to her artwork. Emma wished she could see the world through her daughter's eyes. To Lily, their apartment was home. Their secondhand furniture was normal. The old car that rattled every morning was just their car. She didn't see overdue bills stacked on the counter. She didn't understand the warning notice tucked between grocery coupons and utility statements. Emma folded the paper and slipped it back into the drawer before Lily could notice. Rent was due in 4 days. Her landlord had already given her an extension last month. The grocery budget was almost gone. Her hours at the diner had been cut again after business slowed down. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. She was running out of options. Yet somehow, every morning, she got up before sunrise, packed Lily's lunch, drove her to school, and showed up to work with a smile. Not because life was easy, but because Lily deserved stability, even when Emma felt anything but stable herself. Her phone buzzed. For a brief moment, hope sparked in her chest. Maybe it was a call offering extra hours. Maybe someone needed a shift covered. Instead, it was a notification reminding her that her electric bill would be automatically withdrawn in 2 days. Emma closed her eyes. $27.14 would soon become even less. She looked around the apartment. The faded curtains, the patched couch, the family photos taped to the refrigerator. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and she would do anything to keep it. Lily suddenly looked up from her drawing. "Mom." "Yeah, honey. Everything's gonna be okay, right?" The question hit harder than any bill. Emma forced a smile and walked over, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's face. "Of course it is." Lily nodded, completely trusting her. Emma wished she shared that confidence. Because as thunder rumbled faintly in the distance and the first drops of rain tapped against the window, she had no idea that before the night was over, a stranger would appear in her life and change the course of both their futures forever. The rain intensified as evening settled over the town, turning the streets into ribbons of reflected light beneath the street lamps. Emma stood by the kitchen sink watching water stream down the apartment window while Lily finished her homework at the table. The old weather forecast had promised a storm, but now it felt as though the entire sky had opened above them. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the parking lot for a split second before darkness returned. Lily glanced up. "That is a lot of rain." Emma smiled. "Looks like we are staying inside tonight." She was grateful for that. Staying home meant spending no money. Every dollar mattered now. After dinner, she gathered the dishes and began washing them by hand. The apartment was quiet except for the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the glass. Then she heard something unusual. At first, she thought it was the wind. A faint sound carried through the storm from somewhere outside. She paused and listened. There it was again. Not a voice exactly. More like someone calling out from a distance. Emma frowned and walked toward the window. The parking lot looked nearly empty. Most people had already gone inside to escape the weather. Another flash of lightning lit the area. This time she noticed a figure. Near the edge of the lot, a man stood alone beside the road, partially sheltered beneath a large oak tree. Even from a distance, she could tell he was completely soaked. "Mom," Lily asked. "What is it?" Emma hesitated. "I think somebody is outside in this storm." Lily climbed onto a chair and looked through the window. "Why is he standing there?" "I do not know." The man remained motionless for several seconds before taking a few slow steps forward. Something about the scene felt strange. Nobody walked around in weather like this unless they had no other choice. Emma tried to ignore it and return to the sink. It was not her problem. She had enough problems already. Yet the image stayed in her mind. 20 minutes later, after Lily had changed into pajamas, Emma glanced outside again. The man was still there. The storm had only gotten worse. Rain poured from the sky in sheets. He never left? Lily asked quietly. Emma shook her head. A knot formed in her stomach. She knew what it felt like to have nowhere to turn. Life had taught her that lesson more than once. The sensible part of her mind told her to lock the door and focus on her daughter. But another part reminded her that sometimes people needed help. Then a sudden knock echoed through the apartment. Emma froze. A second knock followed, louder this time. Lily moved closer to her mother. Emma carefully approached the door and looked through the peephole. Standing on the other side was the same man from the storm. Water dripped from his dark jacket. His hair was soaked. Despite his exhausted appearance, there was something calm and composed about him. When he noticed movement behind the door, he offered a polite smile. "I am sorry to bother you," he said through the door. "My car broke down a few miles away, and my phone is gone. Could I please use a telephone?" Emma kept one hand on the door while her mind raced through every reason she should say no. She was alone with her daughter. She barely knew this man. The world taught people to be careful. Yet as she looked through the peephole again, she saw none of the urgency or aggression she feared. The stranger simply looked tired. Rainwater dripped from his sleeves onto the hallway floor. He seemed like someone who had been walking for a long time with nowhere to go. Emma opened the door just enough to speak. "You said your car broke down?" The man nodded. "About 3 miles from here. I tried finding help, but most places are closed because of the storm." His voice was calm and polite. "I only need to make a phone call." Emma studied him carefully. He appeared to be around 40 years old. His clothes were soaked, but they looked surprisingly well made. Even standing in a rundown apartment building hallway, he carried himself with an unusual confidence. "What is your name?" she asked. "Ethan," he replied. "Ethan Brooks." Before Emma could respond, Lily peeked around her side. "Mom, he is getting rained on." Emma sighed quietly. Of course Lily would notice that first. The stranger offered a small smile. "Hello." Lily waved back. "Hi." Emma hesitated for several seconds. She knew she could simply hand him her phone and close the door. But her phone service had been suspended earlier that week after she missed a payment. The embarrassment of explaining that fact made her cheeks warm. "I do not actually have a working phone right now," she admitted. Ethan seemed surprised but did not judge her. "I understand." For a moment nobody spoke. Thunder rolled across the sky. Another gust of wind sent rain into the hallway. Ethan glanced toward the storm before looking back at Emma. "Thank you anyway," he said. "I will figure something out." He turned as though preparing to leave. Something about that bothered Emma. She looked past him into the dark parking lot. There was no shelter nearby, no open businesses, no place to escape the weather. She thought about the $27 in her bank account. She thought about overdue bills and uncertainty. Then she thought about all the times she had wished someone would show her a little kindness when life became difficult. "Wait," she said. Ethan stopped. Emma opened the door a little wider. "You can come in for a while until the storm eases up." Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "Are you sure?" She almost laughed at the question because she was not sure at all. "Just until the weather improves." Relief crossed his face. "Thank you." As Ethan stepped inside, Lily immediately grabbed a clean towel from the bathroom and handed it to him. "You look freezing." Ethan accepted it with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Lily." Emma frowned slightly. "How did you know her name?" Ethan pointed toward a colorful drawing hanging on the refrigerator. Written across the top in large letters were the words Lily Carter. Emma followed his gaze and felt a little foolish. Lily giggled. Ethan dried his hair and looked around the small apartment. There was no judgment in his eyes. No pity. If anything, he seemed oddly comfortable. As the storm continued outside, Emma had no idea that inviting him in was the beginning of a story none of them would ever forget. The storm showed no sign of ending. Rain hammered against the windows while Ethan sat at the small kitchen table, holding a mug of coffee Emma had offered him. It was the last of the coffee grounds in the apartment, something she normally would have saved for the next morning, yet she found herself making it anyway. Lily sat across from him, completely comfortable despite having met him less than an hour earlier. Children had a way of deciding whether they trusted someone long before adults did. "What do you do for work?" Lily asked. Emma immediately gave her daughter a look. "Lily." Ethan smiled. "It is okay. That is a fair question." He paused. "I work with businesses." Lily nodded as though that answered everything. "My mom works at a diner." That is an important job, Ethan said sincerely. Emma expected him to say it politely, but there was something genuine in his tone. As the conversation continued, she began noticing small details that felt out of place. Ethan spoke calmly and confidently about almost every topic that came up. When Lily mentioned a school science project, he explained a complicated concept in a way an 8-year-old could easily understand. When Emma talked about rising grocery prices, he discussed supply chains and transportation costs with surprising depth. It was not what she expected from someone stranded in a storm without a phone or wallet. At one point, Ethan glanced toward a loose cabinet door hanging crookedly above the sink. That hinge has been pulling away from the frame for a while, has it not? Emma looked surprised. A few months. Ethan stood and examined it briefly. Do you have a screwdriver? 10 minutes later, the cabinet door opened and closed smoothly for the first time in months. Lily stared at him as though he had performed magic. You fixed it. Ethan laughed softly. I tightened a few screws. Emma folded her arms. Most people would not notice something like that. I notice things, he replied. The answer was simple, but it only deepened the mystery. Another strange moment came when Ethan accidentally rolled up his sleeve while washing his hands. Emma noticed a watch on his wrist. Even she could tell it looked expensive. Very expensive. The kind of watch she had only seen in advertisements. Ethan quickly pulled his sleeve back down, almost as if he had forgotten he was wearing it. Emma said nothing, but the detail stayed in her mind. Later, while Lily colored another picture, Ethan looked around the apartment. His gaze settled on family photographs hanging near the hallway. You have done a remarkable job, he said quietly. Emma frowned. With what? Building a good life for your daughter. She nearly laughed. This does not exactly look like a success story. Ethan looked directly at her. Success is not measured by square footage or money. The certainty in his voice caught her off guard. Most people spoke about success differently. For a brief moment, she wondered who this man really was. Outside, thunder echoed across the town. Inside, questions continued to grow. Ethan Brooks claimed to be an ordinary traveler caught in a storm, yet everything about him suggested there was far more to the story than he was willing to reveal. The storm finally began to weaken sometime after 10 o'clock that night, but Ethan made no move toward the door. Not because he intended to overstay his welcome, but because the roads were still flooded in several areas and the weather alerts on the local television station advised people to stay indoors if possible. Emma found herself in an unusual position. A few hours earlier, Ethan had been a complete stranger. Now he sat at her kitchen table helping Lily with a math worksheet she had forgotten to finish for school. How did you do that so fast? Lily asked after Ethan solved a problem using a simple explanation her teacher had never mentioned. Sometimes the easiest answer is hiding behind the complicated one, Ethan said. Lily smiled. You sound like my grandpa used to. For a brief moment, something changed in Ethan's expression. A shadow crossed his face before he quickly smiled again. Emma noticed it. There was sadness there. Not the kind caused by a broken-down car or a bad day. Something deeper. As the evening continued, another surprise appeared. The ancient lamp beside the couch suddenly flickered and went dark. Emma sighed. Not again. Before she could even stand, Ethan was already examining it. Within minutes, he had adjusted a loose connection and restored the light. You fix cabinets. You fix lamps. You explain math. What exactly do you mean when you say you work with businesses? Emma asked. Ethan laughed softly. A little bit of everything. It was not really an answer. The more time passed, the more questions Emma had. Yet strangely, she felt less suspicious and more curious. Most people who crossed her path spent their time talking about themselves. Ethan spent most of his time listening. He asked Lily about school. He asked Emma about her work at the diner. He seemed genuinely interested in their lives. Around 11 o'clock, headlights suddenly swept across the apartment window. Emma glanced outside. A black SUV slowly drove through the parking lot before stopping near the entrance. The vehicle remained there for several seconds. Ethan noticed it too. His posture immediately stiffened. Are you expecting someone? Emma asked. No, his answer came a little too quickly. The SUV remained parked for nearly a minute before pulling away and disappearing into the rain. Emma watched Ethan carefully. For the first time all evening, he looked uneasy. Do you know whoever that was? She asked. Ethan stared toward the window. Probably not. Probably. It was a strange choice of words. Before Emma could ask another question, a second mystery appeared. Ethan's attention shifted to a framed photograph on the shelf. It showed Emma and Lily at a county fair 2 summers earlier. "You seem happy in that picture," he said. Emma smiled. "We were. It was one of our better years." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes people have more than they realize." Emma almost pointed out how little she actually had. $27.14. Overdue rent. An uncertain future. Yet something stopped her. Because when she looked at Ethan, she had the growing feeling that the man sitting in her apartment was carrying burdens far heavier than the backpack resting beside his chair, and somewhere beyond the storm, someone seemed to be looking for him. The next morning arrived with clear skies and sunlight pouring through the apartment windows as though the storm had never happened. Emma woke earlier than usual and immediately remembered that a stranger was sleeping on her couch. For a moment, she wondered if the entire evening had been a dream. Then she stepped into the living room and saw Ethan already awake, neatly folding the blanket he had used. "Good morning," he said. "You are up early." Emma laughed softly. Single parents do not get much choice. Lily soon appeared, rubbing her eyes. The moment she saw Ethan, her face brightened. "You are still here." "Looks that way," Ethan replied with a smile. They shared a simple breakfast of toast and eggs. Nothing fancy, but Ethan thanked Emma as though she had served a meal in a 5-star restaurant. That was another thing she could not quite understand. He appreciated small things in a way most people did not. After breakfast, Ethan offered to leave and find his way back to his vehicle. Emma agreed, although part of her felt strangely disappointed. The apartment had felt different with him there. Lighter somehow. Before he left, he helped carry a heavy box from the hallway into Emma's storage closet without being asked. Then he noticed a loose wheel on Lily's bicycle near the front door and fixed it in less than 10 minutes. "How do you know how to do all this stuff?" Lily asked. Ethan smiled. "I have learned a few things over the years." Shortly afterward, he thanked Emma once again and stepped outside. Emma watched from the window as he walked toward the main road. She expected that would be the end of it. A stranger caught in a storm. One unusual evening. Nothing more. Yet an hour later, while cleaning the living room, she discovered something underneath the couch. At first she assumed it was one of Lily's toys. Instead, it was a slim leather card holder. Emma picked it up and opened it. Inside were several business cards. Her eyes narrowed. The cards were elegant, printed on thick paper with a company logo she vaguely recognized but could not place. Beneath the logo was a title, Executive Chairman. Emma blinked. That certainly did not fit the story of an ordinary traveler stranded on the side of the road. She examined another card. The same name appeared, Ethan Brooks. A strange feeling settled over her. Why would someone carrying business cards with such an impressive title claim only that he worked with businesses? Before she could think further, movement outside caught her attention. Looking through the window, she saw another black SUV enter the parking lot. This time it was followed by a second vehicle. 2 professionally dressed men stepped out and began speaking with residents near the building entrance. One of them held a photograph. Emma could not see the image clearly, but she knew exactly who they were looking for. The mystery surrounding Ethan Brooks had just become much bigger than a broken-down car and a night spent escaping the rain. Emma watched from behind the curtain as the 2 men continued speaking with residents outside. One neighbor pointed toward the parking lot. Another shook his head. Whatever they were searching for, it seemed important. Curiosity finally got the better of her. After making sure Lily was occupied with a cartoon in the living room, Emma stepped outside carrying the leather card holder she had found beneath the couch. As she approached, one of the men turned toward her. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit and looked far more professional than anyone who normally visited the apartment complex. "Excuse me," Emma said. "Are you looking for someone?" The 2 men exchanged a quick glance. "Possibly," one of them replied. "Have you seen this man?" He held up a photograph. Emma's heart skipped. It was Ethan. The same calm expression. The same face that had spent the previous evening sitting at her kitchen table helping Lily with homework. Emma tried not to show her surprise. "Maybe," she answered cautiously. "Who is he?" The man seemed relieved. "His name is Ethan Brooks." Emma nodded. "I know that part." The second man stepped forward. "Ma'am, it is important that we locate him." Something about the way he spoke made her even more suspicious. "Why?" For a moment, neither man answered. Then the first one sighed. "Because half the company has been searching for him since yesterday afternoon." Emma frowned. "Company?" The man looked genuinely surprised. You do know who he is, right? Emma slowly shook her head. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Finally, the man said, Ethan Brooks is the founder and chief executive officer of Brooks Global Holdings. Emma stared at him blankly. The name sounded familiar, but she could not immediately place it. Then she remembered seeing it on news articles displayed on televisions inside the diner. She remembered customers discussing stock prices and major business acquisitions. Brooks Global was enormous. It owned companies across technology, logistics, manufacturing, and real estate. The corporation employed tens of thousands of people across the country. Emma blinked. You mean that Ethan Brooks? Yes, the man replied. One of the most recognized business leaders in America. Emma looked down at the card holder in her hands. Executive chairman. Suddenly everything made sense. The expensive watch. The knowledge. The confidence. The black SUVs. The way he noticed details most people ignored. Her mind raced through every conversation they had shared. Ethan had never technically lied. He had simply avoided telling the whole truth. Why would someone like him be walking around alone in a storm? She asked. The two men exchanged another glance. We are hoping he will explain that himself. Emma returned to her apartment in stunned silence. Lily looked up from the couch. Mom, what is wrong? Emma sat down slowly. Remember Ethan? Lily smiled. Of course. Emma stared at the business card resting in her hand. Less than 24 hours earlier, she had offered shelter to a stranger because she felt sorry for him. Now she was discovering that the man who drank coffee in her tiny kitchen and fixed her cabinet door was not an ordinary traveler at all. He was a billionaire whose name appeared in newspapers, business magazines, and television interviews across the country. And the biggest question of all still remained unanswered. Why had he chosen to hide it? Emma spent the rest of the afternoon distracted. Every time she tried focusing on household chores, her mind returned to the same question. Why would a billionaire disappear without telling anyone where he was going? The version of Ethan she had met did not match the image she now found online. During a quiet moment, she searched his name on an old laptop. Article after article appeared on the screen. Photographs showed Ethan standing beside politicians, business leaders, and celebrities. Headlines described billion-dollar deals and international expansion. Yet the man in those pictures seemed different from the one who had sat at her kitchen table drinking coffee from a chipped mug. That Ethan had listened more than he spoke. He had laughed with Lily. He had fixed a cabinet door without being asked. Late that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Emma opened it and froze. Ethan stood in the hallway. He looked cleaner now, wearing fresh clothes, but the expression on his face was exactly the same. Calm, thoughtful, almost hesitant. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. I suppose you know who I am now, he finally said. Emma crossed her arms. That depends. Do you mean Ethan Brooks the traveler, or Ethan Brooks the billionaire chief executive officer? A faint smile appeared on his face. Fair question. Emma stepped aside and allowed him inside. Lily immediately ran into the room. Ethan, she shouted happily. You came back. His smile widened. I said goodbye too quickly this morning. After Lily returned to her room, Emma sat across from him at the kitchen table. You could have told me the truth. Ethan nodded. I could have. Why did you not? He looked down at his hands for a moment before answering. Because I wanted one day where nobody knew who I was. Emma remained silent. Ethan continued. For years, every conversation started with my position, my money, or my company. Every room changed the moment I entered it. People treated me differently before they even knew me. His voice carried a quiet exhaustion. I was beginning to forget what normal felt like. Emma studied him carefully. For the first time, she noticed how tired he truly seemed. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. So you walked away? She asked. Ethan nodded slowly. After a board meeting, I started driving without a destination. I kept thinking about how disconnected my life had become. Then the storm came, my car broke down, and somehow I ended up here. He looked around the small apartment. And for the first time in a long while, nobody wanted anything from me. Emma thought about that. Most people assumed wealth solved every problem. Yet sitting across from her was a man who seemed lonely despite having everything money could buy. You know, she said quietly. When you showed up at my door, I had $27.14 left in my account. Ethan looked surprised. And you still invited me inside. Emma shrugged. You looked like you needed help. Ethan's expression softened. That may have been the kindest thing anyone has done for me in years. Over the next several weeks, life slowly returned to normal, or at least what passed for normal in Emma's world. She continued working long shifts at the diner. Lily continued bringing home school projects and drawings that covered the refrigerator. Yet something had changed. Ethan kept his promise to stay in touch. Sometimes he called. Sometimes he stopped by when business brought him near town. Despite everything Emma had learned about him, he remained the same person who had walked into her apartment during a storm. Then one afternoon, Emma received a call she never expected. A representative from one of Ethan's companies invited her to interview for a community outreach coordinator position. The role offered better hours, full benefits, and a salary she had never imagined earning. At first, Emma resisted. She did not want charity. When she spoke to Ethan about it, he understood immediately. "This is not a favor," he told her. "You are qualified because you understand people. You know what struggling families actually face. That perspective matters." After several interviews, she accepted the position on her own merits. Months later, she found herself helping families access housing assistance, educational programs, and job resources. For the first time in years, she was not constantly worried about whether she could pay rent. Lily flourished as well. Her school performance improved, and she joined activities Emma had never been able to afford before. One evening, nearly a year after the storm, Emma stood in the backyard of a modest home she had recently purchased. It was not a mansion. It was not extravagant. It was simply a safe place where she and Lily could build a future. As the sun set, Lily ran across the grass laughing while chasing fireflies. Ethan stood nearby, smiling as he watched. "You know," Emma said, "when I first saw you standing in that storm, I almost did not open the door." Ethan laughed softly. "I am very glad you did." Emma looked toward her daughter. "I thought I was helping a stranger." Ethan nodded. "And I thought I was escaping my life for a day." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan said something she would never forget. "Money can solve many problems, but it cannot teach kindness."